You're watching Strat News Global, and this is Talking Point. Today, we're discussing how to counter China when push literally comes to shove. I'm Amitabh Reddy. Very glad to have Ambassador Sujan Shenoy. He's the Director General of the Manohar Parrikar Institute of Defence Studies and Analysis, and ex-Ladakh Corps Commander, Lieutenant General Rakesh Sharma, who's also a distinguished fellow with CLAWS. Thank you so much for joining us. Ambassador, if I can quickly get your take on what you see, if anything, that's different in the standoff that's currently taking place and the subsequent talks.
Well, thank you, Amitabh, for having me on your show and for posing that question. My own view is that the boundary question, as you know, and the question of the LAC, particularly the differences over the line of actual control, are an old matter. They're not new.
Yeah.
And we've been grappling with both these issues for the best part of about 60 plus 65 years. So, in effect, I can say that there is nothing dramatically new, but what is new indeed is the fact that both sides are patrolling more frequently as a result of better infrastructure. China had the first movers advantage, but today India is doing a great deal to develop its own infrastructure. And besides, we also have the thaw that comes typically with onset of spring and summer. So this is usually the time in the year when there is a little bit more of toing and froing. Overall, I would say that there has been a higher incidence of ingress into the border areas by the Chinese as well as the Indian side up to respective perceptions of the LAC because of better border infrastructure. And every commander, as General Sharma will tell you, wants to go up to his line of actual control. So that brings the sides together more frequently and more often.
And of course, there's much more information that's coming out. General Sharma, can you, there is no dearth in terms of repeating ourselves. Can you explain to a normal lay viewer why these areas where what's happening is so strategic?
Okay, first let me say that this transformation has happened in the course of last 8 years. It happened first in 2012 when there was a place called Samarlungpa, which is on top of Dorodway Gold. It happened. The difference is that when the two forces meet or two patrols meet, they tend to not disengage as laid down in the protocols and the architecture which has been decided in 1993 and 2005 and 2013. So this, and it happened in 12, it happened in 13, 14, 15, and happened 17 in Doklam, and now. So what happens is that when there's fistcuffs and brawls there, rightly so, the banner drill should take place. They should disengage and go back to the border personal meetings and discuss those issues. That has failed. The architecture is failing, and gradually it is failing for a longer durations. It happened for 3 weeks in 2013, but now look, Doklam was 75 days, and it's happened now. It's already 6 weeks going. So the transformation is total. And while we can take solace in the fact that no bullet has been fired, but where is the guarantee for tomorrow? That tomorrow some Jawan or somebody loses his temper, or there is something happens and a bullet goes through. So a tactical situation would automatically become strategic and international. So we have come to a cusp where the situation can be termed as increasingly getting serious. Now this area belongs, the strategic value of this area belongs to us. It has been stated to 1954 onwards. The map stated as Siachen is part of us. We can go back to 1997 or 1897 also. So historically, it's our own territory, and we have to protect our own territory.
I'll just come to that territory so that you can explain again to us in layman's terms what exactly is at stake there. Ambassador, just those are the map that we were talking about there. But Ambassador, the point that the General is making about the protocols that have been set through various agreements over time, not really functioning on the ground for such large periods. Is there a need to relook at them? Is there a need to rework them?
Indeed. I was part of the group that actually set up the first of the CBMs and the protocols as head of the expert group of diplomatic and military officials between 1996 and 2000. I headed the Indian side to those 4 years of negotiations, and the task and mandate was to implement the expert group, which has in a sense been rehashed in 2012 in the so-called border working mechanism. It's really the EG in another avatar. But the point here is that in 1993, we had the Border Peace and Tranquility Agreement, and before that, we had no CBMs in place. So these CBMs and all the measures that we have, protocols in place for peace and tranquility, have been in the making for many years. They have been improved over the years also, with the addition of banner drills and things like that. So in addition to flag meetings, ad hoc flag meetings, we had regular border personnel meetings in a number of places. We've expanded the number of places where we have BPMs and flag meetings as well. And therefore, what General Sharma said is also important, that the current situation also, to me, highlights the need to work even more on developing better protocols and effectively implementing the agreements that we have reached so far. That is very important.
General Sharma, again, I just request you to explain the strategic significance of both sides for the areas which have seen these standoffs, the recent standoffs.
Okay, you see, there are a number of areas where, as the Master Genoy mentioned, where there is a differing ideas of what the LAC is all about. And anytime we discuss, they go back to the map which is given by Chou En-lai on 7th of November 1959, which actually has been translated down to ground. But the fact is that the northern areas, what we call the subsector north, which you see on the map where Dolph Bay, Goldie and Karakoram Pass is shown, there are 5 rivers that come from Depsang Plateau and join up with the Shyok River. Of the 5 rivers, we had the topmost is called Chipchap, the second is called Raki, the third is called Jivan, the fourth is Galwan, and the fifth is a very large one called Cheng Chenmo. This time, the problems have occurred on 2 of them, which is Galwan and astride Cheng Chenmo, which we now talk about the Gogra post or the hot springs, which are astride these posts. After the main axes have been developed, we are now in the process of making the last mile connectivity. We are wanting to join up with the areas of the border, especially in the area of Pangong Tso Lake and also of Galwan. So on his own side, the Chinese have constructed the road in Pangong Tso Lake up to Finger 4, as everybody knows now, Finger 4. But in our case, there is a 1.5 kilometers of gap between Finger 3 and Finger 4. And it's a sheer rock face. And we walk in a single file there. And anytime we start walking from Finger 3 to Finger 4, he is able to observe us from a distant place. And then, he sends his vehicles from Srijab. They come to Finger 4 or 5 and block us there. So our task of going and touching base at Finger 8 is denied by him because he's got a road and we are walking, and he's able to see our walking. So this is actually spoiling the entire game. The whole thought process of protocols and CBMs were that you come and touch the areas which you think is your border, and we are allowed to go and to our areas. It happens in Demchok. Similarly, in Demchok, he's got a road access. Anytime we start walking from Demchok, he's able to look through from his own side. He sends his vehicle on a metal road and he blocks us there. So we are not able, the armed forces are not able to do their task. That goes against the spirit of the CBMs, which have been developed over a very long period of time. Extensive work had gone in making those CBMs. So this is being I would say a little over smart. He's being over smart of denying us our right to either you come and decide and sit down and delineate the line. If you're not delineating the line, then we must go and touch base at the line which we think is our line. You can't deny us both ways.
And the point of contention here, it seems, Master, that area between Finger 4 and Finger 8. Master, you wanted to come in?
No, I just wanted to add something to the LAC bit, which General Sharma just elucidated. The point is that the Chinese have been rather unreasonable over the years in regard to the line of actual control, as General Sharma just suggested. The fact of the matter is that in 1956, there was a very vague reference made by Chou En-lai to Pandit Nehru about the existence of such a line of actual control. By the time we get to 1959, the Chinese were talking about a line of 7 November 1959. But the fact of the matter was that they were not up to that line in any place. They had only a series of disconnected posts which were much further eastwards of that particular line. In 1960, for the first time during the official talks, we had the first detailed description by the Chinese of what they considered their boundary to be and what they considered their LAC to be. And for the Chinese, the so-called LAC of 7 November 1959 was essentially coterminous with what they regarded as their international boundary. But again in 1960, they were not up to that point. The description they gave us in 1960 actually convinced us that what they were pitching for was actually further west from the detailed line that they had suggested in 1959. As of the 8th of September, on the eve of the outbreak of hostilities, the Chinese were still nowhere near their so-called LAC or so-called international boundary. It is only as a result of aggression in 1962 that they got to that point. Now, the short point here is also that they have, despite basic agreements to go in for a clarification and confirmation of the line of actual control, as clearly outlined in the bilateral agreements of 1993 and 1996, that is the CBM's agreement. In reality, the Chinese have been dragging their feet on clarification of the LAC, let alone confirmation. We did have a little bit of clarification on the middle sector. Is the only place where we were able to exchange a large-scale map, but that too did not result in any joint delineation of the line or any kind of joint survey. So therefore, it is actually...
I'm going to bring up this fact of why there is some dragging of feet. General, just coming to you again now, when you look back into history and you see in previous incursions like this or previous incidents like this, standoffs like this, I think there would be an incident where you can recall, was it in 2013, where say the Northern Army commander actually took an act of setting up a tin shed about 500 kilometers away from the Depsang Plains where actually the ingression had taken place, and subsequently in negotiations, then there was a give and take from the Chinese. Is there a lesson to be learned is what I'm asking?
Yeah, it happened then. It happened in 2013 when he came to Iraqi Nala and denied us same kind of patrolling. It's what's happening in Pangong Tso. He denied us in 2013 movement across to patrol points 11, 12, 13, 13 Alpha. And he put tents there and he was not withdrawing. So similar thing happened, and under orders of the Northern Army commander, which has been written in many books, he said, okay, let's do something else, and we did Chumar. And in Chumar, a place called 30R, which comes on the international border, we constructed a track, 10 kilometers, and made a tin shed there. So when the negotiation started on at that time, we negotiated, and actually final negotiation, we removed the tin shed and came back to Chumar village, which was our post there. And he withdrew back from Raki Nala and went back to the Depsang Plateau. So it was a kind of, way out of that imbroglio which happened at that time. And subsequently, I'll also draw your attention to September 14, when General Hooda was commanding the army, Northern Army. And, he constructed now a road in a year and a half up to 30R, and we moved strong force. And I mean, I will not quantify the number of units we moved, but a very strong force was sent across to Chumar to hold him back. So that denied him his progress further from where he had reached. So I would say that, I could say summing up, saying that he respects strength. So, I would learn a lesson from all this is that he learns you have to look in the eyes and show strength. Weakness he takes advantage of.
Ambassador, recognizing strength now, even in these particular incidents, when we saw the Chinese coming in various pinpricks or pinpoints, there was deployment on both sides of the LAC, all from the west to the east, in our respective territories. In strength, we do believe again. But this point of learning from the past, is India always reactive? Are we always defensive in our posture, or should we be actually doing things like the General pointed out, so that in negotiations, ultimately, at the very least, we have a status quo?
Look, let me first of all commend the Indian Armed Forces for their commitment to protecting the sovereignty and territorial integrity of our nation, and we must always respect the sacrifices that they make. The second point here is that our response has been robust in terms of the military response, and that is again highly commendable. And there is absolutely no compromising with India's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Having said that, let me also add that India's notion of an LAC is, how shall I say, not reactive, but one that goes by the principle of respecting a line that has been created as a result of the 1962 aggression. But the fact of the matter is that the Chinese consider their own line to be somewhat subject to local interpretations also. Don't forget, and General Sharma will tell you better, that the last mile interpretation of any line of actual control is not something that is going to be decided in Beijing. It's the local army commander who will walk there and say that I need to be on that spur or on that ridge in order to better defend myself. And therefore, that flexibility that the Chinese bring, which is rather insidious and expedient, creates all kinds of problems. So we have not been reactive. We have been very robust in terms of development of our infrastructure. We are committed to the sovereignty and territorial integrity. At the same time, we are equally committed to peace and tranquility. And we seek to abide by these agreements at all times. So it is hoped and expected that the two sides now, based on the, how shall I say, agreement reached during discussions, recent discussions at the diplomatic and military levels, both sides have made certain statements. The Chinese have also spoken of a peaceful resolution, the fact that the channels are open, the fact that there is a consensus between our two leaders, that the two sides should discuss and resolve this amicably at the earliest. That is what we should be striving for. When push comes to shove is the title of your talk, but really push shouldn't come to shove. We should be able to do better than that.
When push comes to shove, General, of course, India sticks by its guns, but just give us a little bit more about situations like this. Do you see the Chinese as having a larger picture? So if there are several such incursions or pinpoints where there are ingresses, they are actually looking for one particular objective, and they would, in negotiations, try and keep that while giving in or seeming to give in on the others. Is that how you see the negotiating going on in the past, in your experience?
Okay, I absolutely agree with what Mr. Chenoy said. You see, the point is that we may say that there is a line of actual control which he perceives it, but it gets changing most of the time. Sometimes it is one, sometimes new people will come and say you are 7 kilometers inside, somebody else will say you are 1.5 kilometers inside. So every time you have a kind of a clash with these people, you get more and more confusing as these people are changing. Every time you meet them, they change. So there is, if there is an LAC or there is an IB, I think for their own self, there is nothing like this. They feel everything is problematic and they will go to any area and contest it. So the point is that, I agree that there is a possibility and people on ground also are not very much aware, and that's why they create so much of problems here. Now, I also agree that the response is robust and every situation is itself a separate situation. You cannot compare 2013 and 14 to 2020. Things have moved on. Now we have come to a stage of constructing last mile connectivity. We have come far ahead in time and far ahead in our wanting to do something solid. If we are wanting to construct the road between Finger 3 and 4 or 1 to Galwan, that shows immense amount of strength to face the Chinese and get on with it. That shows the robustness of the current situation. How this issue will get resolved, Firstly, I am not fond of all these experts who are telling that so many people are deployed and so many people on ground. All this is hearsay, and it is no truth in that. It is just imagination based on some kind of half news. Let these people on ground who are people of wisdom, people who know the situation, people who know the people across. I remember once upon a time a Chinese leader had come and said he wanted some cancer medicine, which a particular drug. We said we can't buy it in Lhasa or get it from Tar, and you please next time you need to give it to us. The point is that there is always those people know people on ground. It is a kind of diplomacy. Let them handle it. Let them work it out. It may not happen tomorrow. It may happen after some time. But let's give them time. They are the rest judgment. They make the rest judgment. The serving establishment knows the best, and that's the answer to it. Is short answer to it is hold on. Let them do their work. They will find the right answers.
Could I add something to that?
Yeah, I also wanted to, the point that in terms of knowing your adversary, now the Chinese are masters at that, or at least they look at that very closely. How better, Ambassador, can we know who we are dealing with, why we are dealing with them, and what we should be doing in those circumstances?
So it's very important in any negotiation to be the master of your brief. That's the first point. And that is why I agree with General Sharma when he suggested that this kind of a matter is best left to the practitioners, to the experts that we have at the diplomatic and the military level. This is a subject that they should be handling. These are not complex matters that can be handled out of, pardon me for saying so, but studios or, television channels and the print media. Today, of course, people have access to various satellite imagery, and there is a certain amount of information flow that permits this kind of discourse, and it's not bad to have a discourse, but to try and unnecessarily muddle the waters by speculating without proper expertise or specialization is dangerous. As you know, half knowledge, half-baked knowledge is always very dangerous. So leave it to the experts. And as far as the specialization is concerned, I think it's a very good thing that India would look at encouraging more specialization both within the Ministry of External Affairs and the concerned ministries, as well as the armed forces. There is no gainsaying the fact that people who deal with such complex matters should repeatedly be asked to deal with the same subject at different ranks, and therefore, be some kind of corporate knowledge base available to these negotiations, provide continuity.
Yeah, continuity. Go ahead.
As far as the situation on the ground is concerned, General Sharma gave you a first-hand account. He's been in that area. But take Deepsang, for instance. You were talking about Deepsang in 2013. But the fact of the matter is that, there were toings and froings in Deepsang even in the year 2010. On one occasion, the Chinese in 2010 had brought in a bulldozer to try and make some kind of a track out there, etc. So these things have been going on. It's just that in 2010, the satellites were not as active. You, Amitabh, were not as active as you are today. And the flow of information, this explosive flow of information that we have in the information age, was also absent. You can talk about how long these face-offs last. Let's take 1986. In 1986, when, a seasonal post used by the SSB in the eastern sector in Sumdorongchu in the Tawang district was suddenly, found to be tenanted by the Chinese when our people went up after the winter snows had melted. That issue continued from 86 onwards and was finally resolved only in 1994. There were 3 prime ministers who came and went in between. Rajiv Gandhi was the time when it started in 1986. It was finally resolved in 1994 with the pullback of our 2 posts, Jaya and Negi, to the shadow side of the Lungrola ridge. And the Chinese also had to pull everything, across except maybe one small element to the northern bank of the Sumdorongchu. That lasted 7.5 years.
Right, Ambassador, I had earlier, the Ambassador earlier talked about dragging of feet in terms of resolving the issue. I'm just going to take some questions that are coming in. This is from Gopal Ramanathan. says it's obvious that China does not want to resolve the border problem because it manages to keep India off balance. They'll never resolve the border issue. Is that how you see it, General? And I'll come back to you, Ambassador, as well, to look at why the issue is not being resolved. Is it in China's interest to keep it boiling? General?
I would agree with him. Look, the discussions as the ambassador was bringing out, 1981, we started the first level of talks with them to 1988 when Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi went across there. We started the next level. The JWG came up, and then we came the SRs. So the negotiations have been 30 years. 30 years. And I mean to say that we have something to show progress. But talking is talking. But it is not showing progress even after we exchange maps of the central sector. It is not progress to the next level. So the point is that it suits them to keep this problematic situation on so that it keeps us under some kind of a pressure. Well, I would subscribe to the questioner's view on this one. And before I end, I just say one small line. Please allow me.
Sure, sir.
Let's talk about excessive number of troops being there. People are quoting 1 lakh, 2 lakh people. They are across in TAR, etc., etc. Every year they do exercises which we are aware of. They do it in TAR, I mean Tibet Autonomous Region, and every year they are there. So only thing is, like the master saying, media doesn't catch up in normal times. In abnormal times, they say, okay, they got lakh troops or 2 lakh troops across there, and look, what's happening. But what happened last year, or the year before last, or the year before that, when they had similar amount of troops training it, or we were training ourselves in the same area? So I think over-reading also causes this problem.
Overeating. Ambassador, you want to look at why the issue is not being resolved? Is Beijing not wanted resolved?
Well, let me just come in on that. The fact of the matter is that, as General Sharma said, from 1981, we started the official level talks and it continued until 1988. I was part of those talks as well in the 80s. Around 1985, we suddenly had the Chinese reneging on the so-called package proposal that had earlier been associated with Zhou Enlai's offers as well as Deng Xiaoping's offer. And suddenly they said that the biggest dispute is in the eastern sector, and India must make substantive concessions in the eastern sector, and then China will make corresponding adjustments and concessions in the western sector. They never clarified what that meant, by what concessions should India make, what concessions should China make. And we ran the gauntlet with the JWG beginning 1989. I was part of the Rajiv Gandhi visit. I was desk officer for China at that time. And we saw how the JWG ran its course. By 2005, it had done 15 rounds. And when it died its own, death, we had the EG also peter out. So the point here is that negotiations have always been difficult. They have sometimes been, veering towards boundary questions, sometimes towards LAC clarification. In my view, of course, both should proceed simultaneously. And some of the key principles that we have agreed upon in the past, which is that it should be handled peacefully, that the fact that the interests of local populations should be kept in mind, the watershed principle, which is very important to the settlement in the eastern sector. It is important to the settlement even of Doklam, or for instance, Mount Gipmochen, because there also you find that the real ridge that comes from Nepal, towards Batangla, it ends at Batangla. The real watershed is there. So if you go by the principle of the watershed, as was always the intention in all the agreements between India and China, even during the British times, then the Chinese must be forthcoming with regard to what is a commonly accepted international principle. And therefore, I think they have been found wanting in that regard, both with regard to the boundary question and the real reason, also for dragging feet on the LAC is that they have meanwhile kind of built very good infrastructure on their side. And there may be a view in China that there is a tactical advantage not to clarify these matters, because we can move up and consolidate whatever we regard as our line over time, and then present the other side with a fait accompli.
Which India has not been accepting.
No, this is a new India. Please remember, Amitabh, this is not 1962. This is 2020. This is a new India, and this is an India that is fully capable of giving a robust military response. There is no need to refer to asymmetries and things of the sort.
No question about that. General, a quick word on where you see the future in terms of how China sees itself in the future. Do you see this being resolved?
Look, I feel their so-called Pax Sinica is under challenge, and it is being challenged globally. And that's why all over the periphery, from Vietnam to Malaysia to Philippines to Indonesia and India and Taiwan Straits, he is causing this kind of aggressive posture all around it. I feel, personally speaking, that there will be more tension between Pax Sinica and Pax Americana in times to come, and the frustration or the anger will come across to some of the peripheral nations. We have to be cautious.
We have to be cautious. Ambassador, last word?
Well, I would say that, yes, some of the reasons that General Sharma mentioned are valid. China is acting the way it does because, as you know, it's under great international pressure right now. It's also a country that's just had its NPC and CPPCC meetings around the time of national congresses like that. They generally tend to be more, sensitive and want to convey a message to the domestic audience that they are resolute in terms of, safeguarding the sovereignty of their motherland kind of approach. But the fact of the matter is that this is, again, not the old India of 1962. But the way forward, I must emphasize, is through peaceful talks. We must leave it to the experts. We must allow them time. There is no point in rushing them through our discussions because they know best what the information is at hand. And let us remember that there is a strategic guidance being given by Prime Minister Modi in his informal summit with the Chinese president. There is a consensus there that we must use our dialogue mechanisms well in place over the decades. We must do more with regard to, building trust to the extent we can. And we must keep telling them that, look, there are red lines that you can't cross, which we do. And nowadays, we do that more forcefully than ever. And it also conveys the message to them, to the Chinese, that this is not an India that can be taken lightly. And yet, the matter can only be resolved through peaceful negotiations.
Ambassador Sujan Shenoy and General Rakesh Sharma, thank you so much. Appreciate you giving us time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And you can watch all the latest news and analysis on our website, strategynewsglobal.com. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel for getting live notifications for videos like this that we put up. So, Talking Point, I'm Amitabh Reddy.